The bitter wind cut through Hope Blackwood's threadbare shawl. She scrubbed the floor of Madame Finninkle's dress emporium, her knuckles raw and bleeding from the harsh lye soap. Outside, Silver Creek, Colorado, was alive. It was 1876. A boom town full of promise for everyone but her. Women in fine silk dresses would stare as they passed, their whispers like tiny sharp stones. "Harder, girl!" Madame Finninkle barked. Her plump frame hovered over Hope like a vulture. "Those boards won't clean themselves. And mind you don't get blood on my floor." Hope bit her lip. She pushed back the tears. At 22, she had seen more hardship than most see in a lifetime. The orphanage had turned her out at 16. Since then, it was a fight for every meal, every penny, every roof over her head. "Yes, madam," Hope replied. Her voice was soft, but it wasn't broken. It was never broken. She wore her mother's dress. It had been blue once. Now it was a faded, indeterminate gray. The hem was let down 3 times and patched in 7 places. It was the only thing she had left of her. The bell above the shop door jingled. Hope kept her head down. Heavy boots thudded across the floor she had just cleaned. They left clumps of mud in their wake. "Mr. Tucker," Madame Finninkle's voice turned to honey. "What a pleasure. How may I assist you today?" Hope glanced up. The man at the counter was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by the sun. His dark hair curled at the nape of his neck. His jaw was strong beneath a few days of stubble. She'd seen him ride through town, but never this close. "Afternoon, Madame Finninkle," he said. He removed his hat, revealing eyes the color of a summer storm. "I'm needing something for my sister. It's her birthday." Thomas Tucker, owner of the Starlight Ranch. The whispers about him were varied. Some called him standoffish. Others said he was fair to his men. Everyone agreed he was the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, though he never seemed to notice. Hope went back to scrubbing. She moved backward toward the door, trying to be invisible, but her worn-out boot caught on a loose floorboard. The bucket clattered. Soapy water spread everywhere. "You clumsy girl!" Madame Finninkle shrieked. "Look what you've done!" Hope scrambled to right the bucket. She used her soaked apron to mop up the spill. "I'm sorry, madam. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't clean my floors," the woman hissed. "That's coming out of your wages." Hope's heart sank. She barely earned enough for her tiny room above the livery stable. Another reduction meant skipping meals again. It was an accident. The deep voice of Thomas Tucker cut through the tension. No harm done. Hope looked up. He was watching her. His expression was impossible to read. Their eyes met for just a second before she ducked her head. "Mr. Tucker, I do apologize," Madame Finninkle simpered. "The girl is hopeless. I keep her out of charity." Just then, Mrs. Winters from the bakery entered with her daughter, Beatrice. They both looked at Hope with pure disdain. "Still keeping that ragged creature around, Madame Finninkle?" Mrs. Winters asked loudly. "She brings down the tone of your entire establishment." Beatrice giggled. "Mother says a girl who can't keep herself presentable has no self-respect. Look at that dress. It's practically falling apart." Hope's cheeks burned with shame. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Some people simply aren't meant for better things," Mrs. Winters continued, picking up a bolt of fabric. "Born in the dirt, die in the dirt." Thomas Tucker cleared his throat. The sound was sharp in the quiet shop. "I believe I'll need more than just a gift for my sister today, Madame Finninkle." "Of course, Mr. Tucker. What else?" the shop owner asked eagerly. Thomas looked directly at Hope, who was still kneeling on the wet floor. "I'd like to commission a dress, the finest you have." Madame Finninkle clasped her hands. "Excellent. I have some lovely new patterns from Paris for your sister." "Not for my sister," Thomas said, his voice level. "For this young lady here." A stunned silence fell over the shop. Hope's head snapped up. She must have misheard. I beg your pardon, Mr. Tucker?" Madame Finninkle stammered. You heard me, he replied calmly. The finest dress you can make. For her. Hope slowly got to her feet. Soapy water dripped from her apron. Sir, I don't understand. His gaze was steady. What's your name, miss? Hope. Hope Blackwood, sir. Miss Blackwood deserves better than to be mocked, he said, directing a sharp look at Mrs. Winters and her daughter. Everyone deserves dignity. Mrs. Winters huffed. Mr. Tucker, surely you're not serious about wasting good fabric on— I don't recall asking for your opinion, Mrs. Winters, Thomas interrupted. His tone was polite but cold as iron. He turned back to Madame Fininkle. The blue silk, I think. The color of a clear mountain sky. And whatever trimmings would suit it best. Hope found her voice, though it trembled. Mr. Tucker, I can't accept such a gift. It wouldn't be proper. Consider it payment, he said. Payment for what, sir? A small smile touched his mouth. For teaching some folks in this town a lesson about kindness. Madame Fininkle, ever the businesswoman, recovered. Well then, Miss Blackwood, stop standing there like a post and come get measured. Hope stood frozen. This couldn't be happening. But my work can wait, Thomas said firmly. Madame Fininkle, I trust you'll give Miss Blackwood the rest of the day off, with pay. The shop owner's face tightened, but she nodded. Of course, Mr. Tucker. As Madame Fininkle led Hope behind a screen, she heard Mrs. Winters mutter, Scandalous. What interest could a man like Thomas Tucker have in a pauper girl? Hope wondered the exact same thing. The measuring was a blur of cold hands and the scent of expensive fabric. When she emerged, Mrs. Winters and her daughter were gone, no doubt off to spread the story across town. Thomas was waiting. The dress will be ready in a week, Madame Fininkle said, handing him a receipt. Make it 3 days, he countered. He placed several gold coins on the counter. It was far more than the dress would cost. Madame Fininkle's eyes widened. 3 days it is, Mr. Tucker. Hope followed him outside onto the boardwalk. The cool air was a relief. Why did you do that? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He studied her for a moment. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Miss Blackwood? Hope braced for pity. What, Mr. Tucker? I see someone who has nothing, yet holds herself with more dignity than most who have everything. He settled his hat on his head. I've been watching you, never complaining, always working. 3 jobs, is it? She nodded, shocked that he'd noticed. The dress shop, the laundry, and the saloon kitchen at night. And yet folks treat you like you're less than them. People see what they expect to see, Mr. Tucker. Thomas, he corrected. And I'd like to see you smile. I have a feeling it would brighten up this whole dusty town. Despite everything, Hope felt her lips curve upward. Thank you, Thomas. But I still don't understand why. He looked down the street, his expression thoughtful. My mother came to this territory with nothing, worked as a seamstress. People treated her the same way. He turned back to her. She taught me a person's worth isn't in their pockets, but in their heart. And you, Miss Blackwood, strike me as rich indeed. Hope felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Most people are fools, he said simply. I have business at the bank. I'll return in 3 days for that dress, and I hope you'll do me the honor of wearing it to supper. Before she could answer, he tipped his hat and walked away. Hope was left standing on the boardwalk, stunned, wondering if she had dreamed the whole thing. But she hadn't. 3 days later, she stood before the cracked mirror in her tiny room, hardly recognizing herself. The dress was the most beautiful thing she had ever touched. The blue silk shimmered like water. Madame Fininkle had delivered it herself, her expression sour. Mr. Tucker will call for you at 6, she'd said, thrusting a parcel with a hat and gloves at Hope before leaving with a sniff. At 6, a wagon pulled up outside. Her heart pounded as she descended the narrow stairs. Thomas waited below in a clean black suit. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "Miss Blackwood," he said softly, "you look beautiful." "It's the dress, Mr. Tucker." "Thomas," he reminded her. "And no, it's not just the dress." He offered his arm. As he helped her into the wagon, she saw the stares of passers-by. Her stomach tightened. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," he replied, flicking the reins. They rode out of town as the sun set, painting the mountains in gold and pink. She expected him to take her to the hotel restaurant. Instead, they climbed a winding road into the foothills. "Where are we going?" "Starlight Ranch," he answered. "I thought you might prefer somewhere private." When they crested a hill, the ranch came into view. It was a sprawling house of timber and stone, surrounded by corrals and pastures. It was bigger and more prosperous than she could have imagined. "It's beautiful," she breathed. A woman in her 50s waited on the porch. Her name was Mrs. Henley, the housekeeper. She had warm, twinkling eyes. "Welcome to Starlight, Miss Blackwood," Mrs. Henley said. "It's about time this one brought home someone worth meeting." Thomas led her inside. The house was refined, with polished floors and shelves lined with books. The dining room table was set with fine china and crystal. "This is too much," Hope said, overwhelmed. "Not nearly enough," he replied, pulling out her chair. Dinner was the finest meal she had ever eaten. They talked easily. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents. She told him about the orphanage. "You've done more than make do," he said. "Most would have been broken by what you've endured." After dinner, they sat by the fire in the parlor. "May I ask you something, Thomas?" she ventured. "Why did you really buy me this dress? The truth." He leaned forward. "A month ago, I saw you in town. It was raining, and you slipped in the mud carrying laundry for the hotel. Everything went flying." He smiled at the memory. "Anyone else would have cursed or cried, but you just got up, gathered everything, and went back to start over. No complaints, no self-pity." "That's just life," she said simply. "No," he corrected. "That's character. The dress was an impulse. I couldn't stand hearing those women talk about you that way." "So it was pity," she said, feeling a strange disappointment. "Admiration," he countered firmly. "There's a difference." The ride back to town was quiet under a blanket of brilliant stars. At the livery stable, he helped her down. "Thank you for the lovely evening," she said, suddenly shy. "And for the dress." "It suits you," he replied, "though you'd be just as remarkable in sackcloth." He took her gloved hand. "May I call on you again, Miss Blackwood?" The question surprised her. "People will talk." "Let them. I'm asking what you want." No one had ever asked her that before. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that very much." He smiled, raised her hand to his lips, and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she felt lighter than she had in years. For just one night, she allowed herself to feel worthy of fine things, worthy of being seen. The next morning, she arrived at Madame Fininkel's shop to find a small crowd of women gathered inside. The conversation stopped the moment she entered. "There she is," Madame Fininkel hissed. "The little schemer herself." Hope froze. "Don't play innocent with us," Mrs. Winters pushed forward. "We all know what you're doing. Setting your cap for Thomas Tucker." "Shameless," another woman muttered. "I've done no such thing," Hope protested. "Mr. Tucker was simply being kind." "Men like Thomas Tucker don't spend that kind of money on shop girls out of kindness," Madame Fininkel said coldly. "What did you do to encourage him?" "Nothing. I barely knew him. Before you trapped him into buying you expensive gifts," Mrs. Winters interrupted. "My Beatrice has been trying to catch his eye for 2 years, and suddenly he's escorting you to his ranch. Alone." "Nothing improper happened," Hope insisted. Just then the bell jingled. Sheriff Miller entered, his face grave. Miss Blackwood, a word? Anxiety clutched at her chest. Have I done something wrong, Sheriff? Not exactly. But there have been complaints about you, creating a disturbance. That's ridiculous. I've just arrived. I'm referring to your association with Mr. Tucker, the sheriff clarified. Some folks are concerned it's inappropriate. Hope stared at him. Since when is having dinner with someone a disturbance? When it gives people the wrong idea, Mrs. Winters interjected. A man in his position, a girl in yours. It suggests things. What Mrs. Winters means, the sheriff said, is that there are concerns about your intentions. My intentions? Hope's voice rose. I didn't seek Mr. Tucker out. He offered me kindness when the rest of this town has offered nothing but scorn. A hush fell. Hope had never raised her voice before. Now see here, Sheriff Miller began. No, you see here. A deep voice came from the doorway. Thomas Tucker stood there, his tall frame filling the entrance, his expression like a thundercloud. What exactly is happening in here? Thomas! Mrs. Winters recovered first. We were just explaining to this girl that her behavior... Her behavior? Thomas interrupted, stepping into the shop. From what I heard, it's your behavior that needs explaining. All of you. Ganging up on a young lady who has done nothing but work hard. Hope had never seen him angry. A muscle ticked in his jaw. We were merely concerned, Madam Finninkle said. A man of your standing. My standing is not your concern, Thomas cut her off. Nor is who I choose to spend my time with. He walked to Hope's side, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. Miss Blackwood, I don't believe this is a conducive working environment. Perhaps you'd prefer to tender your resignation. Her heart pounded. Quitting meant losing a third of her income. But the thought of staying here was unbearable. I believe you're right, Mr. Tucker, she said, lifting her chin. Madam Finninkle, consider this my notice. The shop owner's face mottled with rage. You'll regret this, girl. No one else will hire you now. I wouldn't be so sure, Thomas said mildly. Mrs. Henley was just saying she could use an assistant at the ranch. The position includes room and board, of course. Hope looked up at him, stunned. This was the first she'd heard of it. You'd bring her to live at your ranch? Mrs. Winters gasped. Thomas, think of your reputation. My reputation, he said evenly, is that of a man who judges people by their character, not their circumstances. Come, Miss Blackwood. We'll collect your things. He escorted her from the shop. Once outside, she pulled away. You shouldn't have done that. Now the whole town will be talking. His expression softened. They were already talking. At least now they'll have something worth gossiping about. I can't accept a position at your ranch, she insisted. It would only confirm what they're thinking. And what's that? She looked away. That I'm trying to trap you. That I have designs on your fortune. He chuckled. Is that what they think? I'm not offering you charity, Hope. Mrs. Henley genuinely needs help. You'd live in the housekeeper's quarters with her as your chaperone. All perfectly proper. His eyes held hers. Unless you'd prefer to stay in town and continue to be harassed. She hesitated. What about my other jobs? We'll speak to your other employers. This is your choice, Hope. A real one. She realized he was right. The thought of leaving the judgmental stares behind was a powerful lure, but there was something in his eyes, a seriousness that went beyond her employment. It felt like he was offering her a lifeline, but she couldn't see what she was being saved from. Not yet. May I think about it? She asked. Of course, he said, and walked with her to the laundry. To her surprise, Mrs. Coleman, the owner, treated her normally. It wasn't until later, as Hope was hanging sheets, that the older woman approached. Heard there was quite a scene this morning, Mrs. Coleman said. Hope tensed. Yes, madam. About time someone stood up to that bunch of harpies. She chuckled at Hope's startled look. Thomas Tucker's a good man. His mother was my friend. Seems she raised her boy right. He offered you a position? Yes. I said I'd think about it. Smart girl, Mrs. Coleman nodded. But if you're asking me, you could do worse. That ranch has always treated its people fair. That evening, at the Silver Dollar Saloon, the reception was different. The cook, a cranky old man named Silas, glared at her. There she is, the girl who thinks she's too good for honest work now that she's caught a rich man's eye. Before she could respond, the saloon owner, Mr. Donovan, called her into his office. I'll come straight to the point, he said. There's talk about you and Tucker. Several of my regular patrons have expressed discomfort with your presence. Because I had dinner with him? Hope asked, incredulous. I'm not saying it's right, he sighed. Just that it is. Perhaps a leave of absence might be wise. He was firing her, gently, but he was firing her. She stood up, tired of it all. It won't blow over, Mr. Donovan. People have decided what they think of me. As she left the saloon with her meager pay, a strange sense of freedom washed over her. 2 jobs lost in one day should have terrified her. Instead, it clarified everything. Her mind was made up. She walked through the darkening streets to the livery. She would accept Thomas's offer, not because she had no other choice, but because for the first time she was choosing her own path. She didn't know then that the path led into a danger far greater than town gossip. It was a path paved with old secrets and fresh hatred, and it was already leading to a night of fire and ash. The next morning, Hope packed her few belongings into a single carpet bag. Thomas arrived with Mrs. Henley to collect her. As she climbed into the wagon, she saw Beatrice Winters and her mother watching, their faces thunderous. Hope lifted her chin and turned away. Their opinions no longer mattered. The journey to Starlight was filled with Mrs. Henley's cheerful chatter. Thomas has been talking about getting help for ages, the housekeeper said. This place is too much for one old woman. When they arrived, Hope was shown to a snug bedroom off the kitchen. It had a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the mountains. It was the nicest room she had ever had. Dinner's at 6, Thomas said from the doorway. Rest today. Get your bearings. Later, Mrs. Henley helped her unpack. She exclaimed over the blue silk dress. My, that's a fine piece. It was a gift, Hope explained. From Mr. Tucker? Mrs. Henley's eyes twinkled. Was it now? Well, Thomas Tucker doesn't do anything without a purpose. The housekeeper's words were cryptic, leaving Hope with a sense of unease. The days at Starlight fell into a pleasant rhythm. The work was hard but satisfying. Mrs. Henley was patient and kind. Thomas, though busy, always made time to speak with her. A slow, easy friendship began to grow between them. But beneath the calm surface of the ranch, something was wrong. Hope began to notice small things. A gate left open, allowing a dozen head of cattle to wander off. A bag of expensive seed found ruined, soaked with water. A prize-winning bull that fell suddenly ill with no obvious cause. Each time, Thomas's face would tighten. Mr. Reeves, the quiet, watchful foreman, would report the incident, and the 2 men would ride out, their faces grim. Thomas never spoke of these things to Hope directly, but she saw the worry in his eyes. He was carrying a burden, and she was beginning to understand it had nothing to do with her. One afternoon, he found her in the sunroom, a glass-walled room his mother had filled with flowers. She would have liked you, he said quietly. Mrs. Henley told me she was a wonderful woman. She was, he said. She also had a spine of steel. She had to. This land wasn't settled by the timid. He hesitated, then looked at her directly. Hope, I wasn't entirely truthful about why I offered you the job. Her heart skipped. Mrs. Henley does need the help, he continued. But I needed someone else in this house, someone I could trust, someone who wasn't already a part of things here. A part of what? These accidents, he said, his voice low. They've been happening for months, small at first, now getting worse. It's sabotage, Hope, Someone is trying to ruin me. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Who? I suspect it's a rival rancher, a man named Hargrove. He wants my water rights. He's been trying to buy me out for years, but I can't prove it. The accidents are clever. They always look like carelessness. He ran a hand through his hair. I needed fresh eyes in the house, someone who might see or hear something the rest of us are too close to notice. So it wasn't just about kindness. It was about protection. He hadn't just offered her a job. He'd recruited her into a silent war. You can still leave, he said, seeing the look on her face. I would understand. She thought of the scorn in town, and the quiet dignity of this man standing before her, asking for her help. She was a part of this now, whether she wanted to be or not. I'm not going anywhere, Thomas, she said. That night, Hope couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the moonlit yard. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, but now she knew it was a false peace. A shadow moved near the bunkhouse. She strained to see. It was Mr. Reeves, the foreman. He was supposed to be in town. He stood in the dark, speaking to someone hidden by the corner of the building. Hope couldn't hear the words, but the tone was urgent, secretive. After a few minutes, the other figure melted back into the shadows, and Reeves went into the bunkhouse. Hope's blood ran cold. Reeves was the one who always found the sabotage. He was the one who reported it to Thomas. What if he wasn't finding it? What if he was causing it? But why? He'd worked for the Tuckers for 20 years. The next week, Thomas announced he was taking her to the harvest dance in town. We have to go, he explained. We have to act as if everything is normal. I can't let Hargrove or whoever is behind this think they're winning. The thought of facing the town again made her stomach churn, but she agreed. She wore the blue silk dress, which Mrs. Henley had carefully mended and cleaned. The town hall was filled with people. When they walked in, a hush fell. Whispers followed them like a swarm of insects. They danced. Hope tried to relax, to enjoy the music, the feel of Thomas's hand at her waist. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Mrs. Winters and her daughter Beatrice cornered her by the punch bowl. I must say that dress looks rather worn, Mrs. Winters said with a fake smile. But I suppose even silk shows its true quality eventually, just like people. The whole town knows how you earned that dress, girl, added Madame Fininkle, who had appeared beside them. Before Hope could respond, Thomas was there, his eyes cold as ice. I believe this is our dance, he said, pulling Hope away. As he led her onto the floor, the band started a slow waltz. He pulled her close. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice low. Standing up to them isn't easy. I'm not afraid of them anymore, she said, and was surprised to find it was true. The real danger wasn't here, it was back at the ranch. He looked down at her, his expression softening. Hope, he began, there's something I need to tell you. But he never got to finish. A commotion erupted at the door. A ranch hand burst in, his face pale with panic. Mr. Tucker, he yelled. Fire at the ranch, the west barn. Thomas's face went white. Anyone hurt? No, sir, but it's spreading fast. Mr. Reeves sent me. Thomas turned to Hope, his eyes anguished. I have to go. I'm coming with you, she said without a second's hesitation. They raced out of the hall. In the distance, an orange glow lit the night sky in the direction of starlight. It was a malevolent, hungry light. They rode hard through the night. The glow grew brighter, angrier. When they crested the final hill, Hope gasped. The west barn was a roaring inferno, flames leaping high into the air. Ranch hands formed a desperate bucket line from the well, trying to keep the flames from the adjacent buildings. The main house stood silhouetted against the blaze. Thomas was off his horse before it stopped, shouting orders, running toward the fire. Hope slid off her mare and ran to find Mrs. Henley, who was organizing the women. All the animals? Hope asked urgently. Safe, Mrs. Henley confirmed. But if it reaches the house? "It won't," Hope said, grabbing a bucket. "We won't let it." For hours they fought the fire, men and women working as one against the raging beast. Hope's beautiful dress was soaked, torn, and covered in soot. Her hair tumbled down her back. She didn't care. Thomas was a whirlwind of motion, directing his men, his face black with smoke. Once he passed her, and his eyes met hers in the flickering chaos. In that look, she saw fear, determination, and something else. Something deeper that gave her the strength to keep going. As dawn broke, the fire was finally contained. The barn was a smoldering ruin, but the rest of the ranch was saved. Exhausted people collapsed wherever they could. Hope found Thomas sitting on an overturned bucket, his head in his hands. She brought him a cup of coffee. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. He looked at her ruined dress, her soot-streaked face. "You're extraordinary. I just did what anyone would do." "No," he said. "Not you. Never you." He reached out, his touch gentle as he brushed a smudge from her cheek. Just then, Mr. Reeves approached. "Mr. Tucker, we found something." His voice was strained. He led them to the back of the burned-out barn. There, on the ground, were several coal oil cans, and a set of tracks leading away toward the eastern ridge. "It was arson," Thomas said, his voice grim. Hope's blood ran cold. She remembered the secret meeting. She looked at Reeves. His face was a mask of concern, but his eyes darted away, refusing to meet hers. Later that morning, as they ate a grim breakfast in the dining room, Thomas pushed his plate away. "Reeves is organizing a search party to follow those tracks," he said. "He thinks they'll lead to Hargrove's land." "Thomas," Hope said, her voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't Hargrove." He looked at her, confused. "Last week," she began, "I couldn't sleep. I saw Mr. Reeves outside the bunkhouse. He was meeting with someone in secret." Thomas stared at her. "Reeves? Hope, he's been with my family for 20 years. My father trusted him completely. I know it sounds impossible, but I saw him." A look of dawning horror crossed Thomas's face. The things that have been happening. Reeves was always the one to report them. He'd know exactly how to hurt the ranch without getting caught. But the question remained. Why? "We need proof," Thomas said, his voice hard. "He's leading the search party. This is our chance." They raced to the bunkhouse. Reeves's room was sparse and neat. They searched everywhere, under the thin mattress, inside his boots, in the small wooden chest at the foot of his bed. Nothing. "Maybe I was wrong," Hope whispered, her heart sinking. "No," Thomas said, his eyes scanning the room. He ran his hand along the rough wooden planks of the wall behind the bed. One of them felt loose. Using his knife, he pried it open. Inside the small hidden cavity was a leather pouch. Thomas pulled it out and untied the drawstring. He poured the contents onto the bed. It wasn't letters. It was a stack of money. A lot of money. And tucked within the bills was a single folded piece of paper. It was a bank draft. It was made out to Jedediah Reeves, and it was signed by a name that made Hope gasp. Not Hargrove, not Madame Fininkel. The signature was clear and elegant. Beatrice Winters. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The scorn, the jealousy, the public humiliation. It wasn't just spite. It was a calculated campaign. Beatrice wanted Thomas. She saw Hope not just as a rival, but as an obstacle to be removed, violently if necessary. And she had found a willing accomplice in Reeves. But why would he betray the family he'd served for so long? "There must be something else," Thomas muttered, his face pale. He ran his fingers inside the empty pouch. He felt a small, hard object sewn into the lining. He took out his knife and carefully slit the stitches. A small tarnished silver locket fell onto the bed. He opened it. Inside, there were two tiny, faded portraits. On one side was a young woman Hope didn't recognize. On the other was a younger, smiling Jedediah Reeves. I don't understand, Hope said. This woman, Thomas whispered, his voice full of shock. This is Reeves's sister. She worked as a seamstress in town years ago. She took her own life. He looked up at Hope, his eyes filled with a terrible, dawning understanding. My father. People said he had courted her, and then he met my mother and broke it off. Reeves must have blamed my father for his sister's death all these years. He was just waiting for his chance at revenge. Beatrice's scorn and Reeves' bitter, patient hatred had combined into a destructive firestorm. Suddenly, they heard the sound of boots on the porch. The door creaked open. It was Reeves. The search party must have returned early. He saw the open wall panel, the pouch, the bank draft on the bed. His face, which had been a mask of quiet competence for years, twisted into a snarl of pure hatred. You should have stayed a charity case, he hissed at Hope. He lunged, not for a weapon, but for the locket on the bed. Thomas moved faster. He tackled Reeves, and the two men crashed to the floor. They wrestled, a desperate, silent struggle. Reeves was strong, wiry, and fueled by decades of resentment. He reached for the fireplace poker. No! Hope screamed. She grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the hook by the door and swung it with all her might. The skillet connected with the back of Reeves's head with a sickening thud. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. Just as Thomas was catching his breath, Sheriff Miller appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn. A loyal ranch hand stood behind him, the one who had been sent to fetch him from the dance. Thomas had quietly sent him back to town for the sheriff as soon as they'd decided to search the room. He'd known deep down that they would find something terrible. Looks like I got here just in time, the sheriff said, looking at the scene. Thomas showed him the bank draft. It was Beatrice Winters. She paid him to do it. The ride into town was tense. They left Reeves tied up under guard. Thomas and the sheriff went straight to the Winters house. They found Beatrice in the parlor, preening in front of a mirror. When she saw the sheriff, her face went pale. When she saw Thomas holding the bank draft, her composure shattered. He was supposed to scare her away, she shrieked. Not burn the whole place down. He promised me you'd come running to me for comfort. Her mother, Mrs. Winters, collapsed into a chair, her face a mask of horror, finally understanding the true nature of the daughter she had raised. Justice in Silver Creek was swift. Reeves and Beatrice were taken into custody. Their trial would be the talk of the territory. Madame Fininkel, implicated in the conspiracy of scorn against Hope, found her business boycotted. She sold her shop and left town in disgrace. In the quiet aftermath, standing in the sunroom amidst the flowers, Thomas turned to Hope. The fire was out, the secrets were revealed, and the danger was gone. All that was left was the truth between them. I started to tell you something at the dance, he said softly. I remember. I love you, Hope Blackwood. He took her hand. I think I started falling in love with you that first day in the shop. I saw your strength, your dignity. I saw a heart as rich as any gold mine. Tears filled her eyes. I love you too, Thomas. He pulled her into his arms. The fire took the barn, but it revealed the truth. It showed me what truly matters. He knelt before her, right there on the stone floor. It showed me you. Will you be my wife? Yes, she whispered, laughing through her tears. 1,000 times, yes. They were married a month later, in the parlor of the ranch house, surrounded by true friends. Mrs. Henley cried. Mrs. Coleman beamed. Even Sheriff Miller cracked a smile. The town, now knowing the truth, had rallied behind them. Their wedding was not an ending, but a beginning. A foundation for a new life built not on silk and circumstance, but on courage and truth, forged in the heart of a fire. 5 years later, Hope stood on the porch of the new house they had built, watching Thomas chase their 3-year-old daughter Clara across the lawn. An infant son, James, slept in her arms. The Starlight Ranch was more prosperous than ever. The West Barn had been rebuilt, stronger than before. Silver Creek had healed. Thomas served on the town council. Hope had started a small school for the ranch children. Life was full and good and peaceful. "Mama, look!" Clara shouted, riding on her father's shoulders. "I'm the tallest girl in Colorado!" Hope laughed. Thomas carried their daughter over to the porch. "And what are my wife and son doing?" he asked, kissing Hope's temple. "Contemplating how fortunate we are," she replied. He put his arm around her. She leaned into his embrace, touching the small gold locket that always hung around her neck. It was a gift from Thomas on their wedding day. Inside, it didn't hold a picture. It held a tiny scrap of blue silk, saved from the ruined dress. A reminder of where they started. A reminder that sometimes you have to walk through fire to find your home. Hope Blackwood's story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't something you can own, but something you build with courage and an open heart. It shows that even in the face of scorn and hidden dangers, a person's character is the one thing that can never be burned away. If you enjoyed this journey of twists, justice, and a love that rose from the ashes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories you won't want to miss.